and welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Center video podcast. Today, our guest is Raúl Wolfgang Bruning, who is a logistic expert from Hamburg in Germany with many years of experience in this particular area. Good morning, Raúl.
Good morning, Sergey. Thank you for having me on the show.
Pleasure. We have seen since days with raising concerns and fears the situation on the Red Sea with the attacks on the cargo vessels. Is the current situation severe, and how severe it is? Does it differ from the previous similar cases?
What we have seen differs from, for example, the 2008 and 2009 Somali pirate crisis, in that this is not only limited to attempts of hijacking ships, and it's not commercially driven. What we have seen is multiple hijacking attempts. We have seen missile attacks, drone attacks against cargo vessels transiting from the Gulf of Aden through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and then into the Red Sea to the Suez Canal. And basically all major European carriers, container carriers, have restricted their traffic through the Red Sea, which means they have to take a long route along the Cape of Good Hope.
But what we have seen recently, or several years ago, as you have described, that were purely economic attacks, right? Like they wanted to hijack goods or to take ransom. Is it different now?
Yes. Like the Somali pirates back then, they were motivated by the fact that if they hold ships for an extended time at hostage, if they take the crew members hostage, that they would get payouts from the vessel owners, from the insurance companies. So this was for them a way to make money, which at some point stopped being lucrative as soon as Western and international naval forces got into the area, and it became more risky and difficult to hijack ships. For the Houthis, this is not the motivation. We have seen 3 hijackings and hijacking attempts. One was a Galaxy Leader, which was done very prominently with a video and helicopter and all. The second one was a MV Central Park, a chemical tanker, which was soon boarded again by the US Navy forces. And the third one is currently hijacked off the coast of Somalia, but is shadowed by Spanish frigates. It seems not to be the main point here, to hijack ships. And there is at this point, no ransom money, no demands. And what we've seen more is attacks on vessels, like actually attacking them with drones, with missiles, unguided missiles, and probably cruise missiles, but that's not completely confirmed. So it's mostly rather low tech. The motivation for the Houthis is not money here. They are basically proxies of Iran. And the motivation was first, at least the stated intended one, was to damage Israel's economy by basically making shipping to and from Israel very expensive. But since they fit also vessels of Western carriers, it's safe to assume that they basically want to damage the Western economy, and that they clearly want to show the West that they can control the Red Sea. They can control who is getting in that Red Sea. So for them, it's a much more geopolitical motivation than any commercial interest.
So they attacked deliberately vessels which route to Israel and the Western vessels. So they let other vessels pass.
That is the case at the moment. They have limited the range of vessels they would attack. And they are expanding it, but they are very, very careful about which ships they attack. So first it was Israeli-owned vessels like the Galaxy Leader. Then it was vessels which have stopped in the past in Israel. And now I think they went for a couple of Western vessels because Western states support Israel. Like, this is what they say. Probably it's more because it's Western vessels and they see it works and they can like escalate this. But they are still, in my opinion, they are not like opening fire on every vessel that go through. You still see single ships, a lot of ships going. Or you also see a lot of Chinese carrier vessels going there, container vessels. But at the moment, one can see that due to the Western container carriers basically not going there, that this is going to be lower and lower, the number of vessels transiting.
And Chinese vessels are not being attacked by the Houthi rebels.
There have been Chinese vessels that have stopped, but they weren't attacked so far, and they continue transiting the Red Sea.
Before we go into details of how the attacks take place and what impact does it have for the Western economy, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. If you have your ideas, leave a comment under this video, and we are going further to discuss the situation on the Red Sea and the impact of the attacks on cargo vessels for the global economy. Raúl, tell me please, for us like non-experts, could you explain what is the modern cargo vessel? What is the size? What is the capacity? How much time does it take for the vessel to come, let me say, from Singapore to Europe, and how much goods does it bring?
Like, the biggest container cargo vessels are up to 400 meter in length and 60 meter in width. This is already the maximum you can build with the current infrastructure, and it's used. Most modern vessels use this like self-restriction and build up to that size. They can transport about and up to and more than 23,000 standard container units. But that is more of a theoretical number. Like, actual load numbers vary depending on the route, depending on the cargo volume they have for this vessel. But it's probably more going towards bigger vessels than not.
And the cost of losing this ship are how high?
It's expensive. We are talking a couple of millions. Like a lot of millions. This is at this point, the price tag for a new vessel is about more than 100 millions, and it's expensive. But what's driving the cost here is not only the risk of it, but the fact like that you don't, at this point, you don't actually risk it sinking, but you risk severe damage. And insuring this risk gets more expensive by the day. We have seen premiums rising very fast for war risk insurance, and that makes it so expensive to have these vessels, besides the actual risk to the cargo. The other factor is that, for example, if you have a cargo ship that goes from Asia to Hamburg, it takes about 4 weeks. If it would go around the Cape of Good Hope, it would have to take, 1-2 weeks extra at least. So you are basically extending the transit time. You have to plan your vessel structure, your supply chain structure new. And all the ports have planned their schedules weeks in advance. Everything that needs to be changed. So the costs first are upfront, like higher fuel costs, longer transit time, and higher insurance, but also the secondary costs of adjusting the supply chains, of adjusting your own production processes. Most stuff we import it's like planned for some time frame, and if that time frame extends over a significant time, then we have problems, then it costs money to fix.
But haven't we learned already how to deal with such problems? The Suez Channel has been blocked for weeks. Just 1 year ago, 2 years ago,
Yes.
during a traffic incident, and the economy hasn't suffered that much from that stoppage.
Yeah, the economy did suffer, but I mean, it was a full stop. No ships could transit the Suez Canal. This is not the case right now. And there's a difference between first having like such an event, which definitely hurts the economy, and actually breaking the economy. It's not economy breaking, but it's something that will make stuff more expensive, that make it more difficult for our economy to further produce, to develop, because we are dependent on it. We are, as Europeans, we are dependent on the maritime trade. We are dependent on imports, and we are also dependent on getting our goods to other places in the world to export them. So it's not like economy breaking, but it's something that adds to an already strained economy after all these years with COVID, with the Suez crisis, with the Russian attack on Ukraine. So it's a factor that damages the Western economy. The other point here would be that when you see that, for example, Chinese vessels can transit the Suez Canal without problems, and if the message after all is that if you want to avoid trouble, you have to buy in China and book with China, I don't think that's a pretty good look for our own like trade agreements and export and import agreements.
Absolutely, that looks much more like blackmailing. But what can we do here? Like the military escorts by the Navy vessels, is one of the options, and we have already seen that the US has sent like several Navy vessels to the region. Can we escort every single container vessel which is going through the Red Sea?
As you said, we have seen uh, several military vessels moving into the area, most notably the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group, which is going from the coast of Yemen to the Bab el Mandeb Strait. And we have also seen European vessels going there. I don't think that you could basically escort every single one, but I think one can like make convoys in which we could then have single vessels assigned to like a bunch of freighters, which then passes straight. So I think this is what will happen rather soon. I can see that the Americans don't want to stick around like for another 20 years in the Middle East to put it a bit in a bit more jokingly fashion, but mostly it's a European issue. The traffic that goes through the Suez Canal is mostly from Asia to Europe. And here, in my opinion, the EU must step up. It's not possible, for example, for Denmark to protect all Maersk vessels flying under flying the Danish flag, but it's possible for the EU to provide robust protection to vessels transiting the strait. And I don't think that carriers like Hapag-Lloyd or Maersk or MSC, like these carriers, will not go back, in my opinion, until they have a fixed agreement in place which ensures safety of their own vessels.
Yeah, that was exactly what I wanted to ask you. How much is the EU capable of protecting this route? Are we, as the Union, are we a naval power?
I think yes. We don't have the naval capacities like the US has, but I think the EU has sizable capacities, and I think that this is like a case where the economic damage is high, where the damage to our own trade policy interests is high enough that we will get the vessels together we need there throughout the EU. I think the main elephant in the room will be rather how to make the Houthis stop it.
Is it possible?
I think so. But I also can see that especially the US has been tiptoeing around the issue because they have a lot of bases in the area, and the Houthis, but they cannot strike like American proper. They are not Iran or North Korea, but they can inflict a lot of damage in the region. And I can see that the US doesn't want to like throw a lighter in the fuel dump. I think after all, what it will come down to is strategic attacks on the Houthis done by the Americans, because I think the Americans are the only ones who could like bring the strike power there. And hopefully this will make the Houthis think twice if they really want to go on with these attacks for Iran.
But coming a bit like further from this particular case on the Red Sea, there are like several bottlenecks in the world trade routes. It can be the Panama Channel, it can be like the Malacca Strait, and others. There are not so many of them. Can they be blocked by similar actions, and what would be the consequences?
We have several bottlenecks. For example, the examples you mentioned, but also one example that is probably not at risk of war, but that showcases very much the risks of these bottlenecks is the Kiel Canal, which connects the North Sea to the Baltic Sea. And it has like 100 years old locks and with very few gates. And every month or so, a vessel runs into these gates, and one lane has to be closed and that they have to be replaced. And this is always a pretty much a disturbance for the logistic flows. So yes, of course, they can be blocked. They can also become, by like even in peacetime, they can become not being able to pass it. They can be blockaded. For example, the Panama Canal has a historic drought due to climate change, and much of the vessels are either waiting to be rerouted, some even through the Suez Canal, which is a bit ironic. But yes, it's a risk, and I think that we as Western countries, the US included, but especially the Europeans who maybe didn't think so much about the importance of it, have a responsibility and an own shared interest to keep them safe and free.
And some of these actions like can be taken by militant groups, like not only by natural events like climate change you have mentioned with regard to the Panama Canal, but the militant group we have seen it. You already mentioned the Somalia pirate crisis. Now we have like Houthi rebels. It was not possible, as far as I remember, for the vessels, or it was limited to some sort of extent, to get armed protection on board. Like we have seen as crews used water cannons to push away the speedboats of the pirates. They used like other improvised tools. Is it really that problem not to get armed, or are there other reasons for that?
First, armed guards are a regular thing today, even though you often cannot have them or weapons on board in certain territorial waters. But like you can take them in the open sea, and this is how it's basically done. But at the end of the day, it's a risk. It's also pretty costly, and what has been done for the most vessels is to exactly install such protection like fire suppression systems, which can be used in a double role against pirate vessels, like have barbed wire, have panic rooms from which you can shut down the engines, so the vessel cannot like be driven somewhere else where it shouldn't go. But yes, that actually works, and it has been pretty standard for the last few years.
So effectively, there are tools to how to prevent pirate attacks, but of course, no cargo vessel can carry anti-air missiles to shut down ballistic missiles or cruise missiles or other rocketry which was fired upon the ship. Of course, only military support here would be helpful. What is the perspective for the world trade? Like, do we need to expect that most important cargo routes will be guarded by Navy? Otherwise, they will be not as safe as we used to have them?
I think that's increasingly the prospect, yes. And we've seen it with the pirates of Somalia, and with the Operation Atalanta mission that started in 2008. Yes, it's not getting safer. And the way to keep these routes safe is basically to have own military vessels in the area that can respond to any incidents. This is not a question of do we want to do this or don't, or do we want to spend the money elsewhere in Europe, but it's a question of either we protect these routes or we will have economic problems because import-export flows don't go as well anymore.
Well, that is a perspective of deterrence, which is needed also on the high sea. And thank you so much for this insightful interview. It was Raúl Wolfgang Bruning, who is a logistic expert from Hamburg, Germany, and we have talked about the crisis with attacks on cargo vessels on the Red Sea. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. Wait for the new interviews, and thank you, Raúl, for your insightful ideas.
Thank you. You're welcome.